Guess they had their eye on him too.
Hello, do we have, hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing
Glad
fine,
to
thank
have
you.
you participate with us. My name is Dawn Abear, and I'm with Voters East of the Industrial Canal. So we're going to get started because we only have a half hour. But I'd like
Good
you,
evening.
good evening. I'd like you to state your name, what profession you're in, how long you've been in that profession, what seat you are seeking, and your number on the ballot. Okay, Mr. Burns.
I usually let the lady go first.
Okay, Ms. Campbell.
Nandi Campbell. I'm running for Orleans Parish Criminal Court Section G. My number is 92. I have been a lawyer since 2008, so I've been practicing for 12 years.
Thank you.
Good evening and thanks for having me. My name is Lionel Lyon Burns. I'm number 91. I'm a candidate for Criminal District Court Judge Section G. I have 22 years of experience in criminal law, most of which I've worked as a criminal defense attorney and as a prosecutor with the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office, where I tried roughly 167 cases before a jury, 85 cases before a judge, with a 97% conviction rate. I may look familiar to some of you. You may have seen me on TV with State versus Chelsea Thornton, the young mother who had mental illness and who murdered her 2 children. But by the grace of God, the judge found her not guilty by reason of insanity. Or you may recognize me from Wendell Allen when he was shot and killed by a New Orleans police officer and he was unarmed. That's my work. I'm born and raised here in New Orleans, and it's a pleasure being here with you tonight.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce you to our 2 moderators. We have Donna Glapion and
Hey, Donna.
Brandon Gilmore, who is with You're Going to Fill Me podcast. So let's get started.
Okay. First question, and we'll go in the order of Mrs. Campbell answering first, then Mr. Burns, and if you can, please hold your answers to a minute, if possible. My first question, how many jury and judge trials have you tried at criminal court? And if you tried any, how many were domestic cases?
So as a criminal defense attorney, let me start off by saying my whole practice is criminal defense. I don't do any family law. I don't do any civil law. I went to law school at the age of 33. I used to be in the banking industry, and I also used to work for the city of New York. At 33, I went to law school specifically to become a public defender, a criminal defense attorney. As a criminal defense attorney, my focus was on justice, on the Constitution, and ensuring the rights of my client. And so I didn't keep track of my cases. What I kept track of was the impact of my work on my clients and its family. So I've had several trials in both criminal court, federal court, state court around the parishes. Several of them were domestic violence court, but I didn't keep track of my cases, my wins, my losses. For me, this work is about justice for my clients, for the society, for the community, and for its family. So unfortunately, I don't keep numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
I keep track of my cases because each and every client is not a number to me, but they're a person. They're a person I help get through a struggle. I advocated on behalf of victims of crime for the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office by taking exactly 167 cases to trial before jury. Of the 167, roughly 20 of those were cases that were domestic related. I also work as a criminal defense attorney, and I also work as a civil attorney. So I handle domestic cases over at Civil District Court. I have tried 20 domestic cases over in Civil District Court. So as you all can see, my practice is diverse. Not only do I understand it from the perspective of a former assistant district attorney, I understand it from a perspective of a defense attorney. I'm going to put that together and be an excellent judge.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. And my next question, we'll start with Ms. Campbell first. It's a 2-part question. Why do you believe that the voters of Orleans Parish should elect you? And if elected, what would you do on your first 100 days What's your plans for your first 100 days on the bench?
Thank you. I think the voters should elect me because you can look at my record and find that, number one, my interaction with the district attorney's office, criminal defense attorneys, and also judges have been impeccable. Also, my reaction and my relationships with my clients have been impeccable to the point that I have practiced for 12 years and have never received a single complaint to the disciplinary board. I have never been punished. I have never been suspended. And to me, that record means that my relationships with this community, especially the legal community and the people that I represent, have been impeccable. I have integrity. I believe in quality. I am transparent to a fault. And that's what I'm going to bring to the bench. I am going to bring flex court. I believe that to have people in court at 9 o'clock in the morning, when we know that we cannot hear everybody at 9 o'clock in the morning, is wasting people's time. Jurors sit in the basement and wait for judges to make a decision about whether they're going to trial. So in the first 100 days, the first thing I'm going to do is flex court, where I am going to allot certain cases on my docket based on what I am about to hear, and not just having everybody heard in court, having police officers sit there. Another thing I'm going to work is talk to different agencies so that I can implement an expungement court. I want to promote expungement so individuals could come and get felonies and misdemeanors off their records so that they can move on with their lives and make a better decision as to where to go forward. Another thing I really would like to do, I want to work with specific agencies to ensure that we could have Saturday courts. Coming to court and fighting your case could take a lot out of an individual. Sometimes you have to miss so many days of work that you're in jeopardy of losing your job. So these are things that I plan to implement in the first 100 days of being elected.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Burns?
The citizens of Orleans Parish should elect me, one, because I'm born and raised from New Orleans. When I came up, when I graduated from Warren Easton Fundamental School, you know what they told a guy like me who came from Algiers, who came from McClennyville? You'll never make it. Black males would be extinct by the year 2020. I graduated from Morehouse College with academic honors. I graduated from Southern University Law Center. You know what I still find time to do on Friday nights and Saturday mornings? I go to stadiums. I'm a high school football official with the Louisiana High School Athletic Association. I do football games for NORD. I don't accept any payment. I do it for free. That's why the citizens should elect me. I'm that person you talk about when you say we want to see these young men make something of themselves. We want to see these young men become something. They can look to me. They don't need to look to the east, look to the west, look to the north, look to the south, look in Section G in Criminal District Court. That young man is a shining example that his mother and father raised and put through school. The first 100 days in court, you know what I'm going to do? Because I understand the system. I'm going to review everybody who's been sentenced by all the judges before me. And I'm going to review their sentences. Because the judicial code says that I can't tell you how exactly I will rule. But that's the first thing I want to do, because that's going to help somebody who's estranged from their family and they're stuck in Elaine Hunts. That's going to help somebody that's in Angola that a prior judge or a prior DA threw away because they multiple billed, because people didn't understand the law. Everybody just wanted the position to be cute or because they thought they were entitled to it. No, ma'am.
Thank you for that. And my last question before I turn it over to Ms. Glapion, and we'll start with Ms. Campbell first.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinions in reference to Black Lives Matter?
What is my opinion? Black Lives Matter. I wish we wouldn't have to scream it and yell it. I wish that it was a default. And so what happens is that in the criminal justice system, especially in the criminal justice system, the default is that Black lives don't matter. And I realized that, and this is one of the reasons that I went to law school at 33. I realized that in the criminal justice system, that we were affected far more disproportionate than any other race, and especially African-American males. And so Black lives matter in a way where we have to fight and understand that the criminal justice system is not just based on crime, but it's based on a system that sets up these young Black males at a young age to end up in the system right away. Mr. Burns talked about people saying you will not amount to anything. And sometimes if that's said enough to you and you hear that enough, you believe it. And so not only do Black Lives Matter, but we need to indicate that. We need to tell young children that. We also need to have an education system that impress upon them that not only do it matters, but you can go forward and make something of yourself. And it's not enough to just be like, I am a Black man and I made it, or I'm a Black man and I should be respected. You have to show why you should be respected. So it's not enough for Black men to walk around and say, I'm a Black man who's respected. You need to act accordingly and earn the respect that you deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Burns?
What Black Lives Matter to me, and we have a saying in Algiers, when we do things, we'll do it from the cutoff to the ferry. Till he that hath an ear, hear and understand. What that means to me is that our lives mean something, that we shouldn't be shot down in the street like dogs by policemen, that our lives should not be devalued, that when something happens to a Black person, when they're killed by policemen, the focus is on the policeman right now, the world's eye, yet they still go out and kill Black men as if their lives mean nothing, as if there isn't a movement afoot throughout this nation. Yeah, I'm gonna scream Black Lives Matter until I have the very last breaths in my body, because some people with all the protests today still do not get what Black Lives Matter means, the significance of our movement. It means that we as Black people mean something. We as Black people must be accounted for. We as Black people built this country. We as Black people want the recognition. We as Black people are gonna stand up and work together. We as Black people are not lazy. We as Black people are not trifling. We as Black people are gonna get out there and vote. We as Black people are not gonna be schmoozed from out of town. We as Black people love our community, and we will stand together. I can go on, but I know my time is limited, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. I'm about to turn it over to Ms. Glapion.
Thank you. We're going to answer in the same order, Ms. Campbell and Mr. Burns. My first question is, when it comes to preventing deadly force by the police, do you agree or disagree that law enforcement agencies should be federally regulated versus allowing states the discretion, specifically when it comes to statutes regarding stand your ground and no-knock warrants? Ms. Campbell?
Absolutely. I think that the recent event shows that states cannot regulate in this department. We need federal guidelines that regulates use of force and also immunity. And not only do we need the guidelines, we need the feds to override any guidelines that conflict with what they put in place. It's important because we have found that states, the DA agencies, are not able to regulate police forces. Time after time, we have these killings, and then we have DAs saying it's justified without a thorough investigation. And so I think that what we're talking about is something that we need federal government to step in and say, these are the guidelines. And not only are these the guidelines, but we are going to require that we step in immediately, do the investigation before you could start doing the investigation, so we don't have state agencies botching the investigations before the feds get involved. And this is something that's evident because we don't have just police shootings in one state. When you start seeing this countrywide, state by state, it's very clear that we have a problem. It's an epidemic. And until we decide that this has to be a federal issue, then we're going to continue to see it. And we're going to also continue to see DA offices ignoring the facts and botching the investigations in order to cover up. And so I say absolutely, that is absolutely needed as soon as possible. And I think that citizens should be calling for that, and that should be a mandate for our new president.
If you understand
Thank you,
the
ma'am.
history,
Mr. Burns?
yes, ma'am. If you understand the history of New Orleans, you would understand that to Black New Orleanians, the federal government has always been the friend. When our own police force would not protect people in the Desire Housing Project, hello, Ninth Ward. When the New Orleans Police Department would not protect people in the Desire Housing Project, thus the Black Panther Party The New Orleans chapter was formed to provide protection for those persons. But if you don't have the connection with the community, if you don't know the history, you don't know that story. You don't know that travesty. We need federal help here all the time with use of force, because the federal government has proven itself time and time again to be a friend of Black and brown people here in New Orleans. We're the beneficiaries now of unanimous verdicts. Why? Because it was something that happened nationwide. We cannot rely on the state because the state has failed us repeatedly, because our state is run primarily by whom? By the Republican Party.
We must have, oh, Don is here.
Everybody kind of moved around on my screen.
Yeah, I know, me too, me too.
That's because I fell off, so it
Oh, okay.
rearranged it. So sorry to interrupt you.
We
Ann.
fall down, but we get up.
Okay, my final question. Well, it's not my final question, but next question. With everything that's going on with the pandemic, we have mounting mental health care problems. How will you as a judge help to improve the standard of care with regard to mental health as it relates to domestic and violent crimes?
So I think the first thing we have to do, there's a movement afoot, and people have labeled it defunding the police. And I like to call it defragmenting the police. And I think that what we have to do is kind of equip organizations with social workers and mental health workers so that we're not always sending out law enforcement agents to deal with mental health issues. And so there are a lot of times where there get calls for domestic violence issues that could include family members, a mother and a child, or a husband and a wife, where there needs to be someone there to de-escalate the situation and to identify whether there's some mental health issues at foot. Unfortunately, what happens now is you get a law enforcement officer there equipped with a gun, just trying to figure out who is the aggressor and take someone home. So first we have to acknowledge that people are under a lot of stress, and we also have a mental health component that we might not be able to identify if we're just a police officer or if we're just a lay person responding to the scene. And so I think that when people talk about defunding the police, I think we should start talking about who responds in times of need, and what are we responding to? And so oftentimes I think that if you have a law enforcement officer responding to domestic violence, at times it might escalate the situation, especially if we're talking about somebody who's having some mental health issues. And so I think that either we should have police officers respond with someone who is versed in mental health or versed in social work, and so that you have two people reviewing the situation and identifying what's needed, right? And so if you get to the scene and there are weapons and things have escalated, then maybe it's probably better if we have a law enforcement address it. But if we get to the scene and you have a parent dealing with a child who's having a breakdown, or if you get to the scene and you're having somebody who has some mental illness and that could be identified, then you probably want to de-escalate it and get that person to the hospital rather than escalating it and taking that person to jail. The jail should not be a place to house people who have mental issues, people who have addictions. We should not be paying to house and process these people. We should be paying to heal these people and get to the bottom and offer them support rather than having them sit at jail where we know they're not going to get that support, especially in the COVID times where we are in close proximity by force and extended proximity, meaning we're spending extra time with people. And so I think that the way we respond to this is important.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Burns?
Ms. Glampion, when I'm the judge in Criminal District Court Section G, the first thing I'm going to do, anyone that appears before me who has mental illness is going to need to show that they are compliant with their medication. Why is that important? Because I've represented Chelsea Thornton, who was non-compliant with her medicine, and it resulted in the murder of her 2 children. As a judge, what do I have at my disposal to use? I have what is called the Intensive Probation Department to be used pre-trial by the court to work with persons who are, one, charged with domestic issues, and two, are charged with domestic issues and have mental health issues. As a former worker here in New Orleans with Volunteers of America, I worked as a case manager with persons with mental illness. The first thing we must do is make sure those persons are compliant with their meds. But Judge Blind Burns, they can't come to court. There's COVID. No, the probation and parole, as well as intensive probation, will go out and visit people who are in my section pre-trial and those who are awaiting trial. There's two components: people who are waiting for their case to be disposed of, people whose case has been disposed of. And that's going to also be handled by simply having a mental health court, by identifying people in Section G who suffer from mental illness, to have a specialized docket that's not run by me, the judge, but that's run by social workers who sit in concert with the judge in court, literally, by the judges who have mental health court. They assist the judge with making the decision that's most appropriate for the person who's suffering from mental illness. That's what I want to do. I want to use the resources of the court that are already in place, intensive probation and parole, to get those persons to the services they need. But at first, I need to make sure everyone's compliant with their meds.
Thank you, sir. And now my final question. With regard to criminal and prison reform, what have you done to influence, if anything, any policy changes? Ms. Campbell?
Policy changes. I really appreciate that question. I was part of the movement to change our jury structure to unanimous jury. There was a huge movement, not specifically changed because of other states, but there were people here in different organizations, IPNO, the Public Defender's Office, VOTE, who got together and said enough is enough, we need to change it. And so when it was placed on the ballot, there was a huge movement to get out the vote. Another thing, and so that went through, and I really was happy because the impact it had on some of my older clients meant that they will get a new trial. I also worked with the Innocent Project. When the Innocent Project takes a case, normally what happens is the district attorney tries to force an individual who's granted a new trial to plead, right? You know, prosecutors, especially if you were a prosecutor in the most oppressive prosecutory office under Harry Connick, you were forced to go to trial a lot, right? It was a win at all cost office. And you will notice that a lot of prosecutors who worked in that office, they have really high stats of trial. And what happens to that is that now we're seeing young men who spent 20 years, 15 years, 10 years after being railroaded and not providing the evidence. You had prosecutors who would hide evidence or not give evidence to defense attorneys. They would win at all costs. And so what I did was I offered my services to the Innocent Project, because if these individuals were granted a new trial, I was against them just automatically pleading. The DA's office would always try to pressure them into just pleading automatically so they can get out of jail. And if you can imagine sitting in a cell for 20 years for a crime you didn't commit, when you're offered to get out of jail, you automatically jump. And so I work with the Innocent Projects of New Orleans to represent these individuals free of charge so that they are not forced to plead guilty. It's my hope that if I'm elected, when I'm elected to Section G, that I am going to work with the legislators so that we can shift some of the power that the DA have onto the judge. Currently, judges are not able to dismiss a case, and that's alarming to individuals when they hear that. Sometimes I have clients in court and they say, oh, the judge says they're going to dismiss the case. And so we as judges have to advocate to get more discretion so that we can be able to do creative things when it comes to sentencing, when it comes to cases being brought before us, when we know that the DA didn't do a good screening job. And so that is something that I look forward to doing as it relates to changing the law that impacts individuals in the criminal justice system.
When I'm the judge in Section G, you won't hear any excuses from me. When I say the case is dismissed, the case is going to be dismissed. When I rule that someone has served a disproportionate sentence and they're going home to their mom and kids, they're going home to their mom and kids. Because I have the wisdom and the knowledge of the law to uphold the law and to apply the law fairly and accurately. What have I done in terms of mass incarceration? I represent people every day in criminal district court. I represent Azarias Hurd, who was 18, and he pled to 2 life sentences in a first-degree murder case. I'm trying to get him back in court. I represent Javar Johnson, who pled to an aggravated battery, but was given 40 years in court. That is what I do. I represent the young men who are already in prison, wanting to come home. And I fight, and I get cases of other people. And I show the judges the sentence that you gave this young man is disproportionate. They talk about the case in the country parish where the guy received 40 years for selling a little bit of weed. We have people right here in Orleans Parish who are doing a whole bunch of time for a little bit of dope, a little bit of weed. They still in jail. Nobody's trying to get them out. Nobody's trying to bring them home. That's what I do every single day in criminal district court. Javar Johnson, Azarias Hurd, Fernell Daniel. I not only do it in New Orleans, I do it in Jefferson. I do it in St. John. I do it in Baton Rouge. I do it in New Iberia. My name rings all around the state. I've been in this game for 22 years. And when they see me coming, they know I'm a black man, a tall black man. I stand 6'4". I know the law, and I'm going to represent my client to the fullest ability of mine. And that's my reputation, and that's what I've done.
I want to thank both of you for participating in this forum. Good luck.
Thank
I have
you.
great respect for you all at this horrible time, with COVID-19.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
good luck,
Make it
and
work.
we'll see you somewhere on the campaign trail.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
for
I
your
appreciate
time
your time.
tonight.
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, he's very dramatic. Very.
Oh, because I went to Warren Easton Fundamental. Brad,